Microsoft tells us what the future of Windows is going to be, and you better be paying attention. Happy Friday, friends. It is Friday. August is in the middle of it, and we got Gamescom, the game show coming up here. Ooh, that's next week. We got Microsoft doing things with Windows and telling us what the future is going to be without directly telling us, but we can tell that it's the future. And so, yeah, there's a lot of great questions this week. Let's just dive in. Hopefully you had a wonderful week. Here we go. Microsoft is now bringing all the Copilot Plus features that were not on the Canary build to Canary users. So congratulations if you have a Copilot Plus PC, still a terrible name, and the Canary Ring, and now you can finally utilize those features. Also, Microsoft shipped this right before I started recording. They're also giving some love to dark mode finally again. So some of those prompts and UIs that were not fully dark mode are starting to get tinted again. It's only taken yet 10 years, but we are getting closer. Also, Microsoft is giving more love to its Notepad application, and they're adding new features on the context menu. So this is great news if you love Notepad. This is bad news if you're a Notepad purist, because at the end of the day, you either want Notepad to just be Notepad, or you'd love to see Microsoft updating legacy applications. I don't know how you want to feel about it, but I'm just telling you that it is happening. Also, Microsoft is killing Microsoft Lens. Not surprising, because they're replacing it with Copilot. And so basically you have until November 15th to use it, and then you need to start moving away, because the things aren't going to be happy too far after that. But the big thing that has been going on in the world of Windows for the past couple weeks now, Microsoft has been doing these videos where they have, they say, what is the future of Windows in 2030? And so there was another one on the security side by David, I can't remember his last name. And I actually over-indexed on the title because it said Windows in 2030, I believe it was Windows 2030. And I'm waiting and salivating for Microsoft to finally do the right thing and start calling the updates like Windows 2025, Windows 2026, Windows 2027, instead of Windows 11 24H2. Like, start calling it by the year. It's super easy. You make the 5-year digit one, so like Windows 2025, like the LTSC or the 5-year supports for business, and then 2030 would be the next major update, and you just go about it that way. That would be the great. Anyways, over-indexed on that. However, so Pavan, so if you're not familiar with Pavan is the guy who has taken over Windows and devices after Panos and after Terry Myerson. And so he is the person that when he says this is what's coming to Windows, he knows what's coming to Windows. So you should be paying attention. Now, if you enjoy Windows and those things, you should watch this whole thing. There's a lot of fluff in there, a lot of things that are just nonsense. But there's a couple things worth pointing out, because Pavan starts to point out, like, hey, Windows has already gone through several transformations. We started with a keyboard and mouse. We have touch. We have pen. And the next thing is going to be voice. And so voice is, and natural language input is going to be a big thing for, it sounds like, the next generation of Windows, the next version of Windows, Windows 12, Windows 2026. We don't quite know, whatever they're going to call it. Now, if you've been around for 38 seconds, you also know that Microsoft has tried this before. It was a thing called Cortana, and it didn't do well. However, I think we can all agree that these new AI and LLM models are better than what Cortana was being powered by. So, like, you know what? Everybody gets a second chance in life. So here, Microsoft is going to take their swing. And so I think that's going to be a big thing. The question becomes, like, how far are they going to take this? What are they thinking about it when it comes to devices? Because there's something in the back of my brain that I can't get out, and that they know that OpenAI is going to start building hardware. And we've seen this with, like, the Amazon devices, the Apple. I'm intentionally not naming these things, the previous Cortana devices, so they don't activate in anybody's room. Microsoft knows that OpenAI is going to this voice computer scenario, and like, they're going to be doing it too. They don't want to be left out. Although Microsoft has a rich history of being too early and being too late. Windows Media Center, tablet PCs too early, Windows Phone too late, sort of mentality. HoloLens, or not Windows Phone was too late, but Groove is the one I was thinking of, was too late. HoloLens was actually too early. And so Microsoft does a real good job of being too early or too late. And so they're trying to line this up to maybe like just, the Goldilocks zone. We will see that there's still a lot going on there. But Pavan goes on to say, we will see computing becoming more ambient and more passive into more form factors and become multimodal, basically meaning that everything can become a computer, because if you can talk to it, then it can do the computes and everything else. It makes me a little nervous when you hear this in relation to Windows, because I'm not saying that those multimodal, like voice box things, can't exist in harmony. However, for many of us, like myself, you're not going to use voice with Excel. You're not going to say navigate to cell B2, drag select to the bottom, control shift down, fill. Like that's not going to be a thing that you do. And so I hope Microsoft doesn't lean like too far into it, and we'll see. They're not crazy. They know what happened with Windows 8. They're not going to completely nuke the UI. I say this, fingers crossed. But yeah, like it's worth watching this because he really sort of leans into the diversity of form factors with Windows and trying to support all these things with Windows and try to supporting all these things with AI and agentic interfaces. And so Windows AI might be the next. I hope they don't go to like naming conventions, but like you can imagine Windows AI, like that is their new thing, and maybe I just hope that Microsoft, like Windows 10 comes to an end here in what, like 2 months, something like that. Yes, you can buy extended support, but like the mainstream Windows 10 is finito and done. And so I'm hoping with the end of Windows 11 or Windows 10, like we should be about halfway through Windows 11 life cycle, something like that. So maybe we'll start hearing about the next version. Also, you have to think of it too, like Microsoft knows that sometimes they're too late and sometimes they're too early. I don't think they're going to be too early on AI things anymore, but like we're in that environment. So in my brain, I can rationalize that they're going to try to get this stuff out sooner than we would maybe anticipate, because again, they don't want to be late. They don't want to be falling behind. And so if Microsoft isn't working like full steam ahead on a proverbial Windows 12, then that would be a little unsettling, which is why I lead into this point that they've done these interviews with these people talking about the future, and they're like 2030. Well, 2030 is not that far away. And if they launched a Windows 12 or whatever next week, I'm not saying that they are, it would be around during that life cycle. I think Microsoft is just lining up and telling us what they're going to do. They did this with Xbox, where they came out and said, look, we're exploring different endpoints and all, they're bringing more gamers into the ecosystem, and then all of a sudden their games are everywhere. Here's Microsoft with a security guy and their Windows hardware and software lead saying like, look, voice is the next big thing, agentic interfaces are the next big thing. And so it's like, okay, so when is Windows going to be there? And then it sounds like they're doing all this leading up to the announcement, which hopefully comes sooner rather than later. So just kind of keep all that in your mind. Other things to keep in mind, which hilarious, even though I just said Windows 10 comes to an end, in like 2 months, something like that, roughly speaking like that, Edge will be supported until 2028. And someone's going to say, but Brad, why would they be doing that? Well, couple reasons. One, you can already buy some extended support updates for at least another year on the consumer level. It's $30 or 1,000 Microsoft points or whatever that is are. And enterprises will continue to extend it as well. And Microsoft, here's what they don't want to have happen, which happened with Windows 7. If you remember way back, Chrome came out and said like, yeah, we'll support Chrome on Windows 7 for a couple more years. And Microsoft was kind of left high and dry. And so they don't want that to be happening with Edge. And so they are coming out. Also, they're testing or trialing out potentially a new UI for Edge. This looks, I don't mind this look. I will tell you that anybody who has an iPad, this looks very similar to like the iPad Safari interface. So just keep that in mind. I'm not saying that they copied it, but it looks pretty similar. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I tend to like it. Also, Microsoft just wants to shove more apps onto your taskbar. They're more like applets, if you will. So rather than making search better, they created these little like dedicated apps for My People, which if you remember that one, and like files. And so this is only for Microsoft 365 stuff. They chose to go this route rather than just making search better. But you know what? I digress. So here we go. All right, on to the gaming news, if you will. So Battlefield 6 is doing well. I've played it, and I don't have any screenshots of me playing. It is good. Like, I really like this, and I think Call of Duty should be a little concerned here. Also, there's the second weekend of the open beta, so anybody can go play it for free this weekend. It's good. Like, it's good. I quite like it. I will tell you, I'm going to be curious to see what happens with Call of Duty with Black Ops 7, because it's just been so... tired is the wrong way to describe it, because they have such a factory of content and things always coming out and changing. However, I will point out just one simple fact, that if you're a Resurgence player like myself, it has been stuck on the Alcatraz map for like 7 months or something like that. They have other maps. It's like, give us other maps, but it's just getting long in the tooth. And maybe they're doing that leading up to Black Ops 7 to like get that fatigue, and then here's new stuff and come back. I'm not saying I'm giving up on Call of Duty by any means. However, I am saying I suspect I'll be playing Battlefield quite a bit. Also, Helldivers is coming too, so it's like a 1-2 punch to to Black Ops. And so there was a leak, by the way, if you want to call it that, or whatever you want to call it. So Black Ops 7 is shipping in November 14th is the expected release date based on this leak. However, here's like the real interesting thing on this. Supposedly, according to those leaks, same leakers who are said to be trusted, I cannot personally validate that Nintendo Switch 2 will not be available at launch. Now, this was a big sticking point, remember, if for Microsoft to be able to acquire Activision was like, hey, we're going to support the Switch. The current Call of Duty does not support the Switch, and it looks like Black Ops 7, at least at launch, will not support it either. Which, is that like a breaking of their agreement? I don't know. Maybe did Nintendo say like, we don't really need Call of Duty? I can't imagine Nintendo said that, but you never know. And we can't rule out that like, hey, it will come in 6 months later. They just need more time. Like supporting a new platform like that they were not previously supporting does require a significant amount of work and or effort to make that happen. Also happening, if you have an ARM device, I don't know why I said it that way. It's just been a good day. Also happening, if you have an ARM device, you can now download the Xbox app, and then you can actually see games that will be playing on that you can play on your device. So that's a big step. Microsoft is trying to, they're slowly chipping away at making ARM devices not just better PCs, but also places that you can play games, because historically x86, which is Intel and AMD, have dominated the gaming platform. You can even look at Macs, like they never really got on with gaming, even they're 4 generations in. Some people will point out games. Yes, you absolutely can play games on Macs, but let's be real. Like if you're buying a gaming PC, you're not going to go buy a Mac. You're going to go buy an Intel or x86 device, and that's going to be the premier gaming solution at the end of the day. Speaking of gaming, here's the Gamescom stuff. Looks like Xbox is going to be talking on August 20th, so just a little bit less than a week away. It looks like we'll probably get ROG Ally, the Xbox Ally pricing. I almost said specs and everything else, but I think we'll finally get pricing and official hard release dates and everything else. And so there's a lot on the agenda there about what's happening. I don't know if there's going to be any sneak peeks of everything else, but it is Xbox after all, and they're heading into their holiday shopping season promo run, so I'm expecting that it should be a good time no matter what. So a little bit quiet. I hesitate to say it's like quieter of a week because things are whatever, but like there's a lot there. But however, like we are the first and second weeks of August, like everybody's coming back. You got back to school, and then things really are going to start ramping up here as we head into September. And so let's dive into the questions of the week. Always my favorite part. So we have JG86. Here he goes. Hi, Brad. Hope you're well. I hope you are well. I'm curious about 2 things. When do you think we'll see a homegrown Microsoft LLM, given the issues with OpenAI deals? Wonderful and interesting questions. So there's 2 like parts to this, right? There's the LLM, which is like the underlying infrastructure and data, but then there's the models, which Microsoft has already been shipping. So Microsoft has a bunch of these smaller models, but I think you mean like when are they going to train their own thing, like a Llama 2 or the back-end stuff and all that? We don't know. And I don't think that they've done any. I think they've done smaller models potentially, but I don't think we've seen them do like any of the big guys, if you know what I mean. And I don't know if I can't imagine that's a cost thing, but it's a very good question. He says also, given the lack of exclusives on Xbox, realistically, does the Xbox console have a future? It's clear Sony is going to make PS6 and 7, the cornerstones of Sony proper, but what isn't clear is what Microsoft is going to do with Xbox. Great podcast, by the way. I watch weekly. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you for the compliments and thanks for the question. So the future of Xbox includes hardware. I almost went down the wrong path there for a second, but I was going to say limited hardware, meaning limited hardware from Microsoft. I think we've already seen, this is going to be known as the transition year, which I've mentioned before, but we're starting to see that fracturing of where hardware comes from. And I don't mean fracturing like splitting up of things, but I mean like fracturing of like the avenues and the funnels that bring us hardware, because it used to just be, if you wanted an Xbox, you could go to Microsoft and you could have any Xbox you wanted, as long as it was the one that they were selling. That is no longer the case, especially the ROG Ally is that canary, where it's like that is an Xbox, if you will. And I think the definition of what is an Xbox is going to change dramatically with the next generation of software that is coming out that allows you to run historical games on current hardware, if that makes sense. It's that software. Xbox becomes a software layer rather than purely hardware. However, Microsoft is going to keep building hardware. They've already said they're building next-gen hardware, but I think your point is a little bit more clear. It's like Sony's going to go to PS7. We know that. Is Xbox going to have 3 to 4 more hardware generations from first party? That we don't know, and I think it's a little too far out to speculate, because one of two things is going to happen. Either this next evolution of Xbox is going to be a home run that they have been looking for, where they now have just tons more quote unquote consoles, because that definition is changing, by the way, out in the marketplace, and they'll continue to just do basic revs, basically like the Surface model, as opposed to like this is the only thing you can get. However, if things like don't work out well, I think Microsoft's software future continues on for a very long time. Like they're not going to give up their publishing arm anytime soon. They would, worst case, spin that out, but I don't think that's going to be happening. And I think that they've finally got some good momentum. Grounded just did like 3 million units or something like that. So the inverse question that you did not ask, but I think is worth pulling up. I think it's fair to say that Sony follows a lot of what Microsoft does. They may not always agree with it, and they may not do it in the same way, but they do that. So the question becomes is like, would Sony ever go to the software, the software layer route and third-party hardware? I think that one's harder to justify from Sony's perspective, because if Microsoft is pulling back a little bit, then they might see the opportunity to really swoop in and try to grab those additional units. That being said, I still can. First off, Phil Spencer has said it before that the growth of console gamers is like flat, right? It ages each year. There's not a lot of new console gamers coming online. So for Sony, it may not be as lucrative to be like, we're going to go grab all these new units or users, because at the end of the day, I firmly believe that if you're an Xbox user, your games are there, you're not leaving. Same with PlayStation. And so we'll see what Sony does. We'll see what it does. I love the questions. Maganiki86, Maganaki, I don't know. People are still using the Surface Duo and Surface Duo 2. I got, look at that. I got them both right here. People still use them. I don't use mine too much, but they still work by all means. We have community-backed projects to get modern Android and Windows 11 running on Surface Duo. Why won't Microsoft continue to support this product, or at least make a smaller Surface with Z1 chips or ARM chips? So why aren't they supporting it? It was never financially going to work. There was never going to be a scenario where they think about how many Xboxes they sell. And Microsoft has already said selling Xbox hardware isn't in our best interest. Like they're not giving up. Please don't, confuse those statements. But they're like, look, it just doesn't make sense for us as a business. These devices sold in even less volume. They just don't make sense to Microsoft's business. Now, why don't they keep supporting it? Because there's a lot of reasons why. Unfortunately, none of them are great. First off, you have to keep the team together. Like, you have to understand that, yes, the community can absolutely figure these things out and tinker and get it to work. But when you're an enterprise, like, you can't just ship stuff that kind of mostly sort of works. Like, it has to either be fully worked or not. So you have to keep a large team supporting the hardware, because you need the hardware stuff that goes along with it, right? The hardware team at the end of the day. So keep that in mind. Now, why don't they release like things with smaller chips or whatever? It purely comes down to cost. It's not that they can't, but you got to remember the entire teams that were behind this have been disbanded. Like the leader's gone, Panos is gone, Ralph is gone, right? Stevie Batish is still there, but like the hardware team that actually made these things, they've been scattered to the wind. And so it's not like they can just get the clan back together or the team back together or whatever and just do it. Like it's tough. Like once they made the decision to not support it, there's nobody left to lead it, to take ownership, to get the funding, and to bring it to market. Like these things are heavy lifts. Mr. PKI with a double dose of question. He says, did you ever finish Indiana Jones? No, I went to Battlefield 6 or Doom. And so no, I did not. You can keep writing me for that one. I will probably most likely finish it. His second question is, have you tried Copilot for PowerPoint and Excel? I have tried it for PowerPoint, Excel not so much. Is there really any innovation and amazing capabilities that just not seem to be jumping out? The greatest thing that Copilot for PowerPoint can do is if you have a Word doc and say, go get this started for me, and it does a halfway decent job. It does not get you anywhere close to being like, here's my Word doc of everything I need to present for this whatever presentation, and then turn it into a slick PowerPoint. No, sir. Not even close. It does, generously, it gets you 60% of the way there. And so then you got to go through, polish it up, clean it up, and do everything else. But it gets things formatted. But again, it's not perfect, and it depends on how detailed you write your Word docs. I will tell you, like, programmatically in my brain now. I write things more as if I'm going to feed them into an AI because, yes, they say just use your natural language input. I will tell you that is not. We're not there yet. As an example, I use Cursor a lot with Sonnet 4. I have to enter every prompt and say, and then tell me what you're going to do. And then that way you can review its battle plan before it actually does it. Otherwise, it gets real aggressive. And so that's, you know what I mean. So, yeah. Yep. Scotty says, longtime watcher from here in Jamaica. Ooh, down south. Hopefully, there's a hurricane down in there. Hopefully you are doing all right, Scotty, and staying safe from that. He says, I have to use a VPN to activate Game Pass because it and other services, including buying a game from the Xbox Store. Do you think Microsoft will fix that and allow smaller regions to cloud stream and let us have access? I think it comes down to what are the local regulations, because that always is at play. I do think that they will continue to expand it. The best thing I can tell you to do is just continue to make noise, because if Microsoft doesn't hear the feedback, they don't know to make the change. So that is the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so get all your friends and start telling them to politely ask Xbox to make that available. And if you make enough noise, you probably will eventually get access. It's never on anybody's timeline of quickness, but they do tend to do that because, like, hey, if there's enough people in a region, it probably doesn't take too much effort. However, they do need to actually solidify the functionality. With the one major caveat, I don't know how that works with data centers. So that if it's truly you're just not close enough to a data center for cloud access, then it's a whole different conversation. That popped into my brain a little too late. And Felipe says, I don't feel very confident about Xbox future in terms of hardware and platforms. If we reach a tipping point, do you think they will have the courage to take hard decisions like move away from Windows or Azure in case the success depends upon it? They will not move away from Windows and Azure. That would be... Let's just make up numbers. Let's say it was $5 billion to do that. $5 billion, ton of money, but it's not an infinite amount of money, right? It's a number that's achievable. So Microsoft does all that, and then what do they end up with? The same thing. They didn't gain anything. It would be very hard to do that and ensure backwards compatibility and everything else. So I don't think that is a realistic future. If things don't go as well as Microsoft hopes, I think we would see a couple different action plans. I think we would see them really hard move away from the low margin hardware aspect of it and be like, look, we're just a software layer. We're going to publish everything on PlayStation. Good luck. That's a pretty dramatic approach. The more realistic one I think we would see is that they spin out Xbox into its own thing. That would be the look, this just doesn't fit Microsoft's business model. We can't make it work. We're going to sell off the asset. I think that's the hard reality that would happen someday before they fully just shut down Xbox or anything else like that. Because the black eye that they would take for giving up on Xbox would be monumental, and it would be massive and monumental, which I've already said. So anyways, that wraps it up for this week, guys. As always, love to come and hanging out. Love all the questions. Love just being here on a Friday. So if you're listening to this and it's a Friday, it's a good day. Hopefully you had a wonderful week. We'll catch all of you right back here next time, because the only BS on this podcast is me.